Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning out in Facebook land? My name is Jesan Sorrells, and today we are going to be talking about in our second live stream here on Facebook. We're going to be talking today about leading remote teams with emotional intelligence. Now, some of you saw the live stream from yesterday, and that was really great and awesome. I'm glad you all tuned in. Got some really awesome feedback from folks who watched the live stream and who had some suggestions for me. So I took a couple of those into consideration. You'll see me moving around a little bit. So one of the pieces of suggestion was that I wear something a little bit lighter, right? So I'm wearing this nice light white sweater. Normally I don't wear a white sweater because I use a lot of black markers, and I kind of worry about the white sweater. But then the second suggestion was that I do something about my background, right? Which, I love my background. I love my books, but don't worry. I'm going to be straightening out that background probably by the end of this weekend, and we'll get something a little bit different in here. That way it'll look a little less crowded, a little less busy. And then the third suggestion was maybe, really start to shed some light on me and start to shed some light on some topics. And so we got some lights in here. Those are in here. And we're going to shed some light on a great topic around leading remote teams with emotional intelligence. In our last live stream, we really focused on sort of what are some core things that a leader needs to know in order to lead teams effectively in a remote environment. Now, today we're going to talk about something that is a little more complicated, maybe. Might require a little bit more from a leader. Might require a leader to really level up, particularly in a time of immense disruption, particularly in a time where, hey, everything is shifting and changing and moving quite quickly, and people don't really know what's going on. When you're talking about leading people, emotional intelligence never goes out of style. As a matter of fact, beginning in 1964, it's based on the ability model that came out of Stanford, we really do have to look at, well, what is emotional intelligence? What are the 5 areas that leaders should really focus on with emotional intelligence? And how should they use emotional intelligence in the space of creativity and communication self-awareness in order to lead teams remotely effectively? So we're going to focus on those areas today. We're going to talk for probably about the same amount of time we talked yesterday, about 45 minutes. I would encourage you to share this live stream around if you know people who should be jumping on right now. You can go ahead and grab them and invite them over. I also have a poll attached to this stream. So there's about 3 questions there. I'd love to figure out sort of what are some of your answers. One of the questions is, does emotional intelligence really matter? Yes or no? Some people think it doesn't matter. Some people think, hey, you know what? Command and control is good enough. But in a remote environment where people are operating with distractions at home, and people are even operating underneath a space of fear or panic in a space of disruption, right? People may not necessarily want to be led by command and control. They may need a little emotional intelligence from their leaders. And right now, of course, we can see that up and down, right, our leadership hierarchy at all levels, we have leaders careening from thing to thing. We have leaders going from one idea to the next idea to the next idea, right? We have leaders engaging here and then engaging there, and creating a lot of uncertainty on their own by their actions, even as they react rather than respond to current events. But you as a leader of a remote team, you don't really have too much time to be worried about that because you're careening from thing to thing in your own thing, right? You're moving back and forth from one thing to another. And as we go forth in this training, and like I said, we'll talk for about 45 minutes. I'm going to bring up some points, and then we're going to move on. But as we talk in this training, I really want you to begin to think about your own level of emotional intelligence as a leader. I want you to begin to think about how empathetic really are you, or what are my motivations, or what's my level of self-awareness, right? How can I become a better leader over the course of time? Now, because these live streams are so important, and because this information is so important, particularly now, and because the future of human services consulting and training will lie in doing things like this, we're going to be offering one of these live streams every single week for the next month on Thursdays from 9:30 to 10:30 in the morning. So I would encourage you to take some time, and we'll do this week we were kind of doing them on the fly just to sort of see if they were going to work. But I would encourage you to really tune in. I'll be here talking about an issue, talking about an area where leaders really need to grow and develop as they are leading remote teams through times of disruption and change. And every day we'll be talking about something a little bit different. So today it's going to be emotional intelligence. Tomorrow might be conflict management, or maybe even, here's a big one, adapting to change. Maybe it'll even be motivation, right? How do you motivate people who are working remotely who maybe you don't have an opportunity to have a face-to-face interaction with them so that you can get all of the texture and all of the moments that are happening inside of the interaction? All right, with that being said, let's get started. We're going to talk today, like I said, about the 5 areas of emotional intelligence. And I've got something over here for you. Yeah, I'm not going to write it down in front of you, but I got something here for you that might be helpful for you. So here are the 5 areas of EI, okay? So the first area is self-awareness. Ooh, we love that one, right? Second area is self-regulation. The third area is motivation. The fourth area is empathy. And the fifth area is social skills. These are the 5 areas of emotional intelligence. And we're going to talk about all 5 of these areas today in depth. So in the first area of emotional intelligence, we have to talk about self-awareness. Self-awareness is about how leaders know, or don't know in some cases, themselves. What is it that makes you know yourself? What is it that makes you sit back and sort of do a deep dive into yourself so that during times of disruption, panic, or trouble, you can access what is inside the inner you, the best parts of the inner you? Self-awareness as an aspect of emotional intelligence is the hardest aspect to cultivate. It's really hard to know yourself. It's really hard to know yourself even in good times. And when times are really bad, it's also really hard to know yourself, right? So when we think about self-awareness, really the question becomes, who are you as a leader? Who are you as a person who's seeking to motivate others? Who are you as a person who, well, wants to get the best out of everybody? Who am I? Now, these seem like deep questions, but quite frankly, in a moment of anxiety, in a moment of uncertainty, in a moment of disruption, it's really important to have thought about the answers to these questions beforehand, not necessarily during the time the disruption is actually occurring. Who are you as a leader? That's self-awareness. The second area is self-regulation. This is my personal favorite, right? Self-regulation is about, how do I not eat the marshmallow? How do I not feed into things or feed into areas that make me feel really good and really awesome? For instance, how do I not yell at somebody over Facebook? How do I not send somebody a really snarky text message? How do I not send somebody a message over Slack or over Zoom that I really shouldn't be sending them? How do I avoid, and how do I exercise, not avoid, but how do I exercise impulse control? How do I hold on to those impulses to act and to move? How do I regulate myself as a leader? Do I eat the marshmallow or do I hold off? Now, again, when we're working with people in person, we're working with people one-on-one, the temptation to engage in a lack of self-regulation is huge. The temptation to sort of, hold people accountable and to show them what we're really made of really becomes something that we want to jump on right away. Well, the fact is, when working with remote teams and when people have the option to turn us off, when people have the option to mute us or to totally disappear, when people have the option to put up another screen over here and totally ignore us, self-regulation now becomes less about how do I eat the marshmallow and how do I not eat the marshmallow, and more about how do I modify and make my behavior match the impulses that work best for my team. This is something that's really textural and granular, and I'm using that word a lot lately, but this is one of those areas for leaders that's really important to think about. And of course, self-regulation is the second area of emotional intelligence. Everybody has impulse control. Here's a question I often ask live groups, and I'll ask it to you out here. Raise your hand right now. This is going to be a delicate question, and this will time date this video a little bit, but raise your hand right now if you would cash out your 401k and go buy a Maserati. Yeah, that's what I thought. Everybody right now is really hunkered down, right? Everybody right now is trying not to engage in panic. Everybody right now is trying to engage in a lot of self-regulation and self-control. That's one of the areas of emotional intelligence. All right, the third area of emotional intelligence is motivation. How motivated are you to do the work that you do? How motivated are you to lead the remote team? How motivated are you to really engage with them? Look, motivation wanes. It goes up and down. It goes up and down. And we know that there are extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivators are the ones that are inside of us. They are the internal ones, things like joy and happiness, things like I like this or I don't like this, right? That's that impulse control piece. And then there are all those external motivators, things like money, and I got to keep my job, and I got to pay my bills, and I got to feed my kids. External motivators and internal motivators come together in leaders, particularly when leaders ask and answer the question, why? Why am I leading these people? That's a motivation question. Why am I leading these people? Why am I putting myself out there? Now, again, when you're at work, when you're engaged in face-to-face interactions with folks, it's easy to answer that question. It's easy to say, hey, you know what? I really like these people. These people are like family to me. These people really matter to me. That's my motivation. Or it's easy when you're in a face-to-face interaction or when you're on site in a physical location to really focus on the fact that, hey, I really like this company, or hey, I really like the facilities, or hey, did you take a gander at that beef sandwich in the lunchroom? Motivations can sometimes keep us moving even when our inner motivations don't match the external motivators. And as leaders, particularly with teams in person, balancing those acts, right? Navigating those tensions can be really difficult, even on the best days. But in times when, it's really complicated, and in times when, the motivation may not necessarily all be there, it becomes really, really difficult. Like hyper difficult to figure out where your motivation is. And so, why am I leading these people becomes a core question for leaders with remote teams. Because when they're all the way over there, it's easy to lose motivation. It's easy to become disengaged. And then it becomes even easier to quit and to just leave. All right. Our fourth area of emotional intelligence, area number 4, is empathy. Empathy is about caring. Do I actually care enough to care? Do I care enough about these people? Do I care enough about the work? Do I care enough about whatever the motivators are? Do I know who I am enough to know why I'm caring? Is that caring eating the marshmallow, or is that caring not eating the marshmallow? Am I engaged in impulse control by caring, or am I engaged in a lack of impulse control by caring? Look, empathy is not about giving everybody a hug, which actually these days you probably shouldn't be giving everybody a hug. We should all be engaged in social distancing, right? So giving everybody a hug is not the point of empathy. Giving everybody a hug and making everybody feel good is not the point of empathy. The point of empathy is not, again, to make people feel good. The point of empathy is to see other team members' humanity. Particularly in times like these, seeing people's humanity is huge. People are struggling right now. People are struggling with anxiety and pressure. They're struggling with stress. They're struggling with figuring out, how am I going to keep my job? How am I going to do this remote thing? How am I going to make sure that every single interaction that I have with my boss preserves my job? In some industries, people are thinking about, how am I going to hold on to my job? What is that going to look like? How am I going to maintain a salary? How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to stay in this house? The fact is, leaders have to navigate all of those areas, not just for themselves, but they have to navigate the humanity of the people they're leading. And it's critical for us to understand that people's humanity really matters. Now, sometimes on some teams, people's humanity comes through in a whole bunch of different ways in person, right? So people make jokes or off-color comments. People ignore things, or people are sarcastic. Or people are happy and pleasant. People are really hyper-engaged, right? People go over the top. And the fact is, on remote teams, people do the exact same thing. It's just the navigation of those different areas, the navigation of empathy is a little bit different. Can you be empathetic through a screen? Can you be empathetic through a social media platform? Can you be empathetic through a video conferencing chat? Can you be empathetic? Can you push empathy? Can you project empathy via systems like this? And the answer is yes, you can. You can project empathy. You can project caring if you actually care in the first place. Now, when we think about all of these areas coming together, right? Self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy. Those 4 areas of the 5 of emotional intelligence really matter, and they all sort of collapse down into the final area that leaders have to think about when they are leading remote teams with emotional intelligence. And that final area is social skills. Social skills brings everything together. Social skills is more than just about talking a good game or making sure that people feel good. It's even more than understanding team development, which, by the way, is important. It's more than just understanding how the team is motivated. It's more than just understanding how you are motivated. It's more than just understanding the importance of creativity and face-to-face interaction, all of which will become more and more important as teams become more and more remote. When we think about all 4 of those areas, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy, as they collapse into social skills, they become about the entire team. How is your team on Slack doing, if that's the messaging service you're using? How is your team on Zoom doing? Or, as I spoke to somebody today, how is your team handling it on email, right? Are the emails that they're sending flying fast and furious, trying to make connection, trying to build empathy, trying to connect with people? Or are the emails slow and steady? Or are they intermittent and not coming in almost at all? What is happening with folks' social skills? What is happening on the team? How are people engaging or disengaging? What does that look like? In order to engage appropriately with understanding how teams engage with each other, in order to engage with social skills and social analysis, leaders need to cycle all the way back to the beginning and really look at themselves, looking at their own self-awareness. And growing in that area will then, of course, complete the virtuous circle of the 5 areas of emotional intelligence. All right. So now we got to talk some practicalities, right? We got to talk about sort of what is it that we can actually do with all of this, right? How do we actually make all of this work for ourselves? Because even in the best of times, right? Even in the best of situations, even when there is no actual disruption going on, wrapping our arms around emotional intelligence as leaders is sometimes very difficult for us. It's sometimes very difficult for us to even accept the idea that emotional intelligence might be a thing we may want to lead with. It's difficult for us to understand that emotional intelligence is even a thing. Some of us pull back as leaders. We say, well, I don't really need that emotional intelligence stuff because that's just a bunch of frou-frou. Or, as I once saw somebody comment, that's just an escape for people to not do good work. They'll hide behind emotional intelligence and say it's another form of intelligence, when in reality, it's not. It's just all made up. Well, emotions aren't made up. And when you're leading remote teams, particularly through times of disruptive change, like we are currently experiencing, emotions really do matter. And navigating emotions really does matter. And figuring out how to help your team navigate emotions and navigate the impact of emotions really does matter. So with that being said, I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of what are some areas, maybe not areas, maybe what's one big area? Let's frame it that way. What's one big area that people need to focus on, that leaders need to focus on in order to effectively lead their people through the shoals of being remote with emotional intelligence? So let's take a look. So I'm going to erase this bad boy here. You can hear that. I love that sound. Going to leave a little residue behind. Happy little trees. Yeah, kind of like Bob Ross back in the day. By the way, this marker is going to squeak. Love that. Okay, so we're going to open this up. I'm going to write a big word here. I'm going to underline it, and then we're going to break it down, and we're going to talk about it. Okay? So the biggest area that emotionally intelligent leaders really focus on when they're trying to build teams that really work, particularly remote teams, right? Teams that really want to have some remote success, teams that are struggling in times of immense change. The big area, the one big area that leaders focus on is this area. Dun, 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 dun. Creativity. Leaders focus on creativity. I know, you were looking for something a little more complicated. It's kind of like Sesame Street. When leaders focus on creativity, leaders really get creative about what it is they're doing. Leaders get creative about what it is they're focusing on. Leaders get creative about what their team is focusing on. And of course, leaders get creative on what is actually happening with their team. Now, creativity is kind of underrated. The fact of the matter is, one second. There we go. The fact of the matter is, creativity is one of those areas that sometimes gets underrated by leaders. We tend to think of creativity when we're thinking about it as leaders as, well, that's just something that maybe the artsy-fartsy people do. Or, that's just something that people who are maybe in the marketing department do. Or, that's just not something that's for me. I don't have to be creative. I do what I'm told. And, hey, I kind of hang out, and it's really awesome. It's not creativity. Or here's the other spot where creativity sometimes comes in. We sometimes think of creativity in terms of innovation. We're going to innovate. We're going to be creative. We're going to get 4 people in a room. Isn't it great? And that's not creativity either. And when we're thinking about leading remote teams, creativity has less to do with the devices and the platforms we're using to generate creativity. It has less to do with project management tools and proprietary secure services. It has less to do with the messaging systems that we are using, like chat or instant messenger or text or phone call or Slack. It has less to do with all of that, what the services are, and it has more to do with how we are using the services. Not what, but how. So when we talk about creativity, one of the areas that we may want to think about is this. How do we set up spots? How do we set up engagements? How do we set up moments between people that normally would happen in a face-to-face context, but aren't really happening right now? How do we set those up using the platforms that we have? How do we encourage folks who are working remotely to connect with each other and using these platforms and tools in a really empathetic way? How do we combine our instant messaging with our Zoom capabilities, with our video conferencing capabilities, with our email capabilities? How do we put all of that together into one ecosystem and encourage people to use that? The best organizations that have been using and doing remote work for years, and remember I said this last time, only around 4% of all employees actually have been working remotely for the vast majority of their careers, only 4%. And now we're in a time where the 96% of everybody else is now being pushed into being on a remote team or working remotely. So platforms right now are really looking like, hey, take your home laptop or take your office laptop home. Or, hey, we didn't really have a policy, and now we're being told that we have to have a policy. Look, one of the things that we have to think about is as people are using these platforms, and as we're thinking about how we can help them use them empathetically, what are those spaces that we can create inside of those platforms that will allow them to be creative. The first one might be virtual coffee talks, right? People used to, I won't say used to, but like there's all these social interactions, right, that happen at work. The minor ones that we don't think about that actually help us build emotional intelligence and help us grow in emotional engagement with each other. Once you go remote, you take out all of those moments because there's no physical space. There's no physical space for us to really get together on, right? Well, what would happen if you made these physical spaces virtual spaces? What would happen if you put people together in a Slack channel, or put people together on a Facebook group, or put people together on a Zoom call, right? And backed away and let the interaction just happen. I know. It seems kind of scary to do that as a leader because who knows what they might be talking about? Who knows what they might be getting up to? And by the way, they're on this electronic platform, which means it can be recorded and broadcast out to the world. But here's the thing. You ran the exact same risk at work. It still had an opportunity to get out. People could still have the opportunity to put their entire engagement, their entire conversation on social media. People could have been live streaming out what was in the office. People could have been going back to a video conferencing platform and telling the world what they just talked about at the water cooler. When we set up virtual coffee talks, or when we set up virtual water coolers where people can gather around, people will feel more connected, particularly these days. And that deeper connection really matters for remote work success. Again, the reason why people quit remote work is because they feel disengaged, right? They feel as though they're not being connected with the people that they really want to connect with, who are their coworkers. And you as the leader, remember I said this is about self-awareness? You really have to be inclined in that direction. Not that you have to want, right, to be involved in those platforms or be involved in those areas, but giving people the option, and in some cases, even actively encouraging people to take advantage of it, is really hyper important when you're leading remote teams with emotional intelligence. Now, when we think about utilizing these platforms, when we think about virtual check-ins, when we think about offsite engagements, right? When we think about how everything is going remote right now and how we are in the midst of disruptive change, being creative with these ideas around the virtual aspects of communication can really be quite helpful. I can easily see a time or a team where they get together and they create a virtual chat book. There's a great website called Chat Books, which you should probably check out, where they create a virtual chat book, right? Because if we're all socially distancing, how do we get that texture back of a human to human, face-to-face interaction? So a virtual journal, right? Recording these strange times. Or even a virtual hangout. Google has a great tool called Google Hangouts, which usually is used to encourage people to stop by and to chat with each other. Gamers have been using these kinds of systems for years, right? Putting together chat rooms and talking with each other. Now, obviously in the gaming community, that's a little bit different because there's a uniting factor there. They're all playing the game together. But the uniting factor for your team is they're all playing the game together. And the game that they're trying to win at is work and productivity for your organization, for your team, and for you as a leader. These are some interesting things to think about. And live streaming, by the way, as a platform can also help you out. So, one of the things with this live stream today, one of the options that we had was we could have directly live streamed this to a group. Now, human services consulting and training, we don't have a group online. We may start one as a result of this. As this goes forward every Thursday, and as we talk about these topics and areas, and as more and more interest is generated around these spaces, we may begin to form a group. We've kind of resisted doing that because, well, we go out and we interact with folks, and I get to see people live, and I get to talk with them, and my other facilitators get to talk with them, and so the texture of those interactions is there. But getting creative means getting creative, and so one of the spaces that you could really be interested in doing this as a team is you wouldn't necessarily have to use Facebook, But you could use a live streaming function inside of Zoom or a live streaming function inside of WebEx, and you could create a group and live stream directly to that group on a consistent basis, on a daily basis. These are all just a series of suggestions, some of which are just coming off the top of my head, just thinking about this right now, organically as I'm talking out loud here on this live stream, about how you can creatively get your folks together and how you can grow them in emotional intelligence and ensure that they remain connected, and grow yourself as a leader in emotional intelligence so you can lead them better. Now, the final area, so there's creativity, and the final area that I want to talk about is one that's a little more, it feels obvious, but it's actually not. It's actually not as obvious as even as creativity. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase this and move some things around on my desk. I'm going to erase this. Like I said, the Bob Ross thing, happy little trees. Just going to erase this. It wasn't a mistake. We're just going to erase this. Happy little trees. Happy little trees. All right. So I want to talk about this last area, and it's something that we talked about yesterday, but I want to re-emphasize it because everybody who's here today wasn't here yesterday. And we always have new people coming in and experiencing sort of me for the first time. And while it is a core idea, in particular when you're leading remote teams with emotional intelligence, it's an idea whose time has come. And that area is this one: communication. I love the quote, and I can't remember who it's from some old-timey writer. You'll tell me out there in Facebook land who it is. But this idea that, communication and miscommunication is something that we have to overcome and we have to struggle with, because communication is one of those areas that everybody thinks has happened, even when it hasn't. For instance, I think I'm communicating now. I think I'm putting things out there. I think I'm creating this video, and I think I'm pushing some ideas to you, right? I think that I'm moving forward with you. I think that I'm getting the information out, but I might not be communicating. This might not be the best way for me to communicate. Maybe I need to be sending everybody an email, or maybe I need to be instant messaging everybody, or maybe I need to create a Facebook story or an Instagram story or a Snapchat story or a TikTok story. Maybe 32 minutes is too long for communication, right? Because that's what we're at right now. Maybe we need to go to 40 minutes, or maybe we only go to 10 seconds. Maybe we need to go to YouTube. Maybe we need to go to another platform. Maybe even I need to go face-to-face with a smaller group of people where we can all be appropriately socially distanced from each other. Communication is a huge area in emotional intelligence. It's a huge area in growing emotional intelligence, and it's a huge area in maintaining emotional intelligence. Communication is one of those things that everybody, again, thinks has happened, but sometimes hasn't. I could be talking, but you could not be listening. You could be hearing, but not actually comprehending and understanding. Communication self-awareness for leaders is huge. Communication self-awareness for leaders is important. And communication self-awareness for leaders is critical for their success. Look, most leaders don't really think too much about how they communicate. I was talking with somebody about this recently. Media skills is one of those areas that we're actually going to have to encourage more people to engage with. Pitching and presenting used to be a thing that only executives really had to worry about, right? I mean, I just write a report. I'm a mid-level manager. I just write a report. I send it to somebody up the chain. They read the report, and it's all hunky-dory. And if I have to stand up and talk in front of people, well, fortunately, those are going to be people whose faces I can see, and I'm still going to be nervous even there. And boy, oh boy, don't ask me to stand up in front of a group. Please don't ask me to do that. Now, if you're leading remote teams, you're presenting all the time. You're pitching and presenting all the time. I don't care what platform you're using. I don't even care if it's email. You're pitching and presenting all the time, because guess what? Those people are not in the same space with you anymore. Now the texture of those interactions has disappeared. Now we have socially distanced. And so communication self-awareness for leaders is hugely important, because you have to understand the answers and be honest with the answers to two very important questions. The first one is this: do I get nervous as a leader? Do I lose my cool? Is this something that I'm really not interested in, right? Is this something that really kind of makes me, well, not feel really good? Is this something that I need to look at and change? And of course, the challenge right now is you're being pushed to change rather than slowly being able to glide into change very gently. So do I get nervous as a leader? And then the second thing that you may want to think about in communication self-awareness is, do I feel discouraged as a leader in my communication style? Every person has a different communication style. Some folks are more assertive and direct. Some folks are more indirect. This has nothing to do with introversion and extroversion. This has to do with how is it that I put together words and sentences and framing in order to get people to understand me and to engage with what I'm saying. Some people are much more comfortable being silent and letting their actions speak louder than words. And other people like to flood the zone. They like to talk. I've been talking for 35 minutes here. It's not a problem for me. But everybody's not like that, okay? And so, do I feel discouraged as a leader also goes to, in the space of emotional intelligence and in leading teams with emotional intelligence, it goes to the space of, have other leaders in the past discouraged me in my communication style? And am I discouraging other people in their communication style right now? If we have been discouraged as leaders in our communication style, if we've been told that it's not valid to the organization or not valid to the structure, or that it's invaluable to what we do, and by the way, we're encouraging you to do more of it, and so we're going to send you to training. We're going to send you to pitching and presenting training. We're going to teach you how to put together better PowerPoints. We're going to teach you how to talk to people better. Depending upon whether we've been encouraged or discouraged, as leaders, this helps us or hurts us in our own self-awareness, our own self-control, and in our own self-esteem. Do I feel discouraged? Do I get a little nervous as a leader when I talk to people? Now is not the time to get nervous. Obviously, again, in times of great change, now is not the time to get nervous. Now is the time to move forward, right? Now is the time to jump right in. Now is the time to not necessarily take a speaking class, but now is the time to figure out as a leader, hey, maybe I need to get real with this in order to lead my remote team better, because they're relying on me communicating. They're relying on me communicating effectively, and they're relying on me communicating thoroughly and transparently in order to reduce their fear and anxiety. And yeah, I may have been an introverted, unassertive communicator before, or I may have been an overly assertive, over-communicator before. And maybe in the second example, maybe in the latter, I need to back off. And maybe in the former, I need to move forward. This is communication self-awareness as a leader. This is getting to the core, getting to the meat of what it actually means to lead remote teams with emotional intelligence. All right, so look, we've talked about a lot of different areas today. We've talked about a lot of different topics. One of the other suggestions from yesterday was, as we take these videos and we move them off Facebook and onto our website at hsconsultingandtraining.com, and as we move them over to YouTube where you can watch them for free, one of the things that was suggested yesterday was a downloadable PDF that would be a summary of everything we've talked about today. I think that's an excellent idea, and we're actually moving forward on that right now. So if you head on over to hsconsultingandtraining.com, it'll be up by the end of the day. We'll have a downloadable PDF from our first video yesterday, which really focused just on the core areas of leading teams through times of change who are remote. And then in a couple of days, we'll have up this one, leading others with emotional intelligence. And then lastly, we'll have up our YouTube training that we've got going on right now, our YouTube remote training that we've got going on right now, called Leading Teams That Are Remote, just in general, right? A whole much broader overview around leading people remotely, not just in times of change, but just in general. So I want you to really think about, how do we apply these kinds of things? How do we apply these principles? I want you to head over to hsconsultingandtraining.com today, and you'll go to the HSCT video page, and the download will be sitting right there. I want you to download this item for free. I want you to get it. I want you to print it out. I want you to think about it. Or I want you to save it on your computer, right? And I want you to reference it the next time you have to set up your remote team for a Zoom meeting, or you have to engage with your folks on Slack, or you have to use email in order to communicate clearly. Leading others with emotional intelligence is always a good practice, because people have emotions, people have thoughts and feelings, and people want to know that their leaders are looking at them with humanity and that their leaders are looking at them with care. In particular, as things become disruptive over time, as things become more and more and more uncertain, people are going to be demanding that their leaders have a higher and higher level of uncertainty, which means the bar has now been raised over time. For some of us, this can be really scary as leaders. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't know this was going to happen. This wasn't in the job description. And then for other leaders, this is going to be an exciting time. This is going to be a time of jumping right in. This is going to be a time of, yes, let's get after it. Let's take on the day. Finally, an opportunity. And for both of us, in both of those spaces, for leaders at both ends of that continuum, the number one thing that they're going to need to know about, the number one thing they're going to need to recognize, the number one thing that they're going to need to lead others is emotional intelligence. I want to thank you, those of you who joined me on this live stream today and viewed me live. For those of you who didn't view me live, this will be up on our Facebook page, going up probably about the next 15 minutes, and you'll be able to watch the entire video. And then from there, we'll be taking this video, we'll be putting it on the HSCT page. I'm sorry, not on the HSCT page, on the website, okay, hsconsultingandtraining.com. It's live, so there you go, hsconsultingandtraining.com. We'll be putting it over there. We'll also be putting it on our YouTube channel. It should be up in a couple of days. And of course, we'll have a free PDF download that will summarize everything we've said today. So you'll be able to get that and hold on to that and distribute that not only to your team, but if you're watching this, to leaders who need help right now. And as I said back at the beginning, back at our start, we'll be holding one of these Facebook live streams every Thursday for the next 4 Thursdays going into April, between 9:30 and 10:30 every Thursday morning. And we'll be talking about an area that we think is important for leading remote teams through times of change. I think our next topic, we're sort of noodling on it. We have several topics right now that are floating around: customer service success, conflict management, adapting to change, leading remote teams through failure. We're sort of moving and churning through a number of different ideas right now, and we don't know which ones are going to work and which ones probably won't. If you have any ideas for anything you'd like to see during these live streams, if you have any questions for me, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions at all for what we should put out here for human services consulting and training, for you to help you as a leader as you're leading people through times of change, thank you. If you have any ideas or thoughts at all, if you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to send me an email, Sorrells@hsconsultingandtraining.com, or you can go ahead and comment below the video on Facebook, and we will on the Facebook post, and we will go ahead and answer every single one of those comments. You can always direct message me at the HSCT page on Facebook, and of course you can give me a call. My number is area code 607-239-5571. Thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I hope that this has been of value to you. Like I said, the video is going to be going up in about 15 minutes, and we're going to end this live stream right now. And you have a great day, and get out there and stay healthy. Thanks.